Stacey, Executive Sports Editor with the Salem News, alongside my longtime assistant sports editor, Matt Williams. We are here to talk 2024 Thanksgiving Day. I'm in two cases, Thanksgiving Eve high school football. Willie, what's going on?
What's up?
Not much. Let's get right into it then. Two games on Wednesday, the 27th, including one at Fenway Park between Marblehead and Swampscott. Of course, Swampscott coming off of a loss on Saturday in the Division Six state semifinals to Fairhaven. Marblehead comes in. Their last game was a playoff loss in the quarterfinals at Grafton, but that was a week and a half ago. Marblehead's won, I want to say 10 straight in the series, Willie. Um, what do you make of this game taking place on Lansdowne Street?
Oh, geez, it's interesting. I said to myself yesterday, when was the last time that Swampscott had more wins than Marblehead coming into the game? Of course, the answer was last year. Swampscott had 6 wins and Marblehead had 4, so that didn't go very far. But certainly two pretty good teams. I mean, you got a team with 8 wins, I think it is, against a team with 9 or something like that. So that's pretty good. You wonder just who's going to be able to get back into the rhythm of things. I mean, Marblehead, for all intents and purposes, still hasn't had its head coach and its associate head coach for weeks now. They've been practicing, and that's no knock on the other coaches, but it's just strange, right? The kids aren't in school, which is also very strange. It reminds me of baseball a little bit, and you'll know what I'm talking about. A lot of times when the seniors graduate, strange things start happening. You see really good teams kind of flame out in the state tournament because
Yes.
they're out of their routine, they're out of school, they're not practicing at normal times, and that's kind of what's going on for Marblehead right now. Very unusual to see that in the fall, whereas Swampscott, just played only 3 days ago against a really physical Fairhaven team. Kind of took it on the chin, kind of had some injuries. Maybe some of that stuff was precautionary, but they're a Division Six team. They're not the deepest team, in North America already. So, there's going to be a lot of ice baths over there. I hope a lot of stim and massage gun work going on to try to get those guys ready
Right.
in only 3 days and I'm sure once the ball's kicked off, right, the adrenaline's going to flow. They're going to feel really good. They're not going to be thinking about how sore they are or whatever. But, still the process of going through that over the past couple of days has to be somewhat daunting.
I would think so. Just to touch on Marblehead for a second, I have been led to believe that head coach Jim Rudloff and offensive coordinator Mike Giotti will be able to coach in the game. So I'm sure that's a boon for Marblehead. And Swampscott, as you mentioned, coming off of a difficult playoff loss, but as Peter Bush, the head coach, told me, less than 5 minutes after that game ended, we got to turn this switch quickly here. That um, we'll let this sink in for a few hours. We'll feel what this playoff loss is like, and then it's time to get ready for Marblehead. And it's not just another Thanksgiving Day game. It's at Fenway. It's special. And I have to say, I know maybe not so much now, but during the course of the season, I think this was supposed to be a Marblehead home game. And there were some complaints about, oh, we got to play at Fenway. We don't get to have our home game or whatever. I'm like, give me a break. I mean, if I'm a kid, yeah, playing your home turf is terrific, and go out with a win or last game there or whatever. But everybody wants to play at Fenway. This is like an iconic thing. It's an event. Not that Thanksgiving in itself isn't an event, but this is a special event. For special rivalries. And I just can't understand that thinking. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that or not.
Yeah, I mean, I know football teams don't get as many home games as basketball teams or soccer teams, because the schedule's half as big. But, you're only going to play, those kids, those seniors have played at Piper Field, 15 times, 16 times. They're only going to play at Fenway once,
Right.
right? So, I mean, I certainly don't think that's such a big deal. I think it's going to be hopefully a great atmosphere, hopefully a big crowd.
Ask
And
anybody who played in that 2010 game at Fenway for Marblehead hockey. I mean,
right.
I'm not even sure that was like a so-called sanctioned event. That, if I remember right, that was kind of snuck in. in between ice times, and the whole game lasted an hour, I want to say. And I'm sure none of those kids will ever forget it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, I know like, and, back then it was kind of novel, it was brand new. Now there've been so many teams that have played there, it maybe doesn't carry exactly the same meaning, but I mean, I know like Masco, for instance, played there. They played against Everett. They kept it pretty close, but they knew what it was going there. They kind of got their doors blown off at the time. Everett was, number one, number two in the state, something like this. But those kids will never forget the experience of walking out there at Fenway Park and getting to play a game in that atmosphere. So I think it's pretty cool. I'm looking forward to it. These teams always, seem to play relatively close games, and I certainly don't think that'll be any different this time. It's interesting. Swampscott has the bell cow running back in Henry Butler over 1,000 yards. Marblehead tends to spread it around a little bit
Yeah.
more. I mean, I think if you took their three primary running backs and their two quarterbacks and added them all together, you'd probably have about 1,000 yards. But they kind of keep the legs fresh and spread it around a little bit more, which makes it a little bit more difficult to predict.
Yeah, I think actually between just the three running backs, if you're looking at Yandel Garcia and the two quarterbacks who also run, Finn Gallup and Colt Wales, that's about 1,000 yards right there. You add another captain, Brady Selvace, into that, that's another 200 there. And I think combined, those four have 14 touchdowns. So that's a pretty good little a running back, so to speak, in one package. Even the goal line back, Bernardo Banas, they use him in those short yard situations. He's got four scores near the goal line, so they can certainly make hay near the goal line if they choose to run the ball. And as we know, they use two quarterbacks with Gallup and Wales. Gallup has the better numbers. I think it's about 800 yards passing, 10 touchdowns. Wales is in the 450 range with four touchdowns, but they're both dangerous. They can both get the ball to their receivers in open space, whether that's Crew Monaco, tight end Sam Thompson, Rylan Golan, who you took in our fantasy draft. I know Kieran Moss has come on of late for them. Salvase is another
Good
option
one.
for them.
Yep.
But that's not to say that Swampscott is a one-man show with Butler, who, as if you didn't watch our fantasy football draft, and if you haven't, I suggest that you do our Thanksgiving fantasy draft. But we mentioned that Henry Butler came out of that game against Fairhaven in the first half, was a little bit banged up. He was going to be reevaluated on Sunday. I have not checked back in with Peter Bush on that, but I would have to think, barring a major injury, he's gonna go on Thanksgiving night. So that'll be a nice push for that Swampscott offense. We also hope Will Bush, who's pretty much their second back, around the 230, 240 range rushing the ball. He got dinged up. We think of him more as a linebacker, but hope that he's able to go. And of course, John Von Barta, we talked about him before, sophomore quarterback. He's really stood on his head. 131 completions, 1,600 yards, 21 touchdowns, leads the North Shore in both of those two categories. A lot of guys to throw the ball to. Liam Keeney, Joe Marino, Jay Domlowitz, Nikeelan Davis, Butler, Noah Bascon has emerged a little bit out of the backfield. So this should be a pretty fun game. As you mentioned, for Swampscott, let's end the season. Let's turn it around quickly. Let's end the season with a win at Fenway and end this losing streak against Marblehead. For Marblehead, it's, hey, we lost in the playoffs. Our coaches couldn't coach. Let's turn it around and play Marblehead football, win on the holiday, keep that streak going, and walk out of Fenway winners.
For sure, yeah, for sure, yeah. So let's move on to the other. We'll go chronologically here.
Yeah,
The other Wednesday game is the Catholic Central League showdown between Bishop Fenwick and St. Mary's Lynn. Of course, they've played just about every year since 2012 or so. But for the first time in 6 years, it's back on the holiday, or at least the
yeah.
holiday eve.
And do you recall the
Uh,
last time, what happened the last time they played on the holiday eve?
Yeah, it was cold and it was one-sided. But
I want to say it was 60-0 for Fenwick.
yeah, yeah,
But with
yikes.
St. Mary's going on to the playoffs and resting a lot of guys, that should be said. But I think that game caused some bad feelings, certainly.
What do you I mean what do you make of this? Fenwick, kind of hit the skids a little bit. They've lost two in a row. I think it's three out of four. St. Mary's has also lost I think in the playoffs, bounced back with a competitive win over Manchester Essex.
Yeah.
But what do we sort of make of this Fenwick team that kind of has, seems to have played its best football in September and October? How do they find that? How do they find that form again?
Well, I think you hit on it on something, as part of our football package you wrote for tomorrow, and I'm not letting the cat out of the bag here, so to speak, but you mentioned that after a pretty good regular season in which they kept points down to a minimum, that was not the case in their two most recent games against Norton, excuse me, and North Reading, where I want to say they gave up 35 points in each game. Is that correct? I want to say.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So some cracks in the armor there late in the season. They need to tighten those up. I mean, you're facing a St. Mary's team that does have an awful lot of offensive weapons. And forgive me, I am going to completely butcher this name, and the late Bill Kaporis would be all over for me for this because it's a Greek name. But Demetrius Koustaflakis, I believe I'm saying it right. I'm probably not, but forgive me there. Senior, he's like 14 yards short of 1,000 on the year. He's got 9 touchdowns. Roman Merriman, he's another sophomore. He's had a really good season for them with close to 600 yards, 11 touchdowns on the ground. The junior quarterback, Yanil Belliard, is thrown for close to 900 yards, 10 touchdowns. Tyler Guy, he's one of their senior receivers. He's got 30 catches, 500 or so yards, 8 touchdowns. A lot of playmakers on that side of the ball. This is going to have to be one of those head on a swivel type games for Fenwick so that they can be aware of where the football is at all time, get guys to the ball, make sure none of those talents are getting out in open space where they can really cause chunk plays for St. Mary's. I think first and foremost for Fenwick, defense has to be the name of the game.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because I think we saw, in the North Reading game, they were able to put some points on the board,
Yeah.
and then kind of, actually rallied to take the lead and then kind of didn't do what they wanted to do exactly defensively. But I think again, two teams that, the game matters. CCL title, of course, not on the line with Bishop Fee and having run the table, but I think this is a good matchup. Fenwick has been a little bit nomadic on the holiday. Certainly one of our most nomadic squads.
Yeah,
When we
when I
look
did that
historically.
research recently about our Thanksgiving Day records for coaches, under Dave Woods, they played 6 different opponents. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, that's a lot. I mean, and hopefully they can kind of, keep the feelings bottled up in this one, keep this
Yeah.
one, traditional and keep it going. I know like certainly in some sports it means more than others. I mean, girls basketball certainly jumps off the page as a major rivalry. Probably is number one between these two schools if
Yeah.
I had to do a power ranking, but football's got to be right up there too. And hopefully this can kind of spark this and keep it going. As we jump to
Let me just say
Thursday.
real quick here. I think Fenwick did have a lot more success throwing the football their last time out, which is going to have to continue. Braden Clifford will be looking for his receivers downfield, whether that's Jesse Timpson, whether it's Patterelli out of the flat, whether it's Tyler Connolly. If Odin Guerin, the tight end, can go, we'll be looking for him. Um, Craig Massoni maybe in that mix as well. And the Fenwick line, which is a little bit undersized but sturdy, needs to do its job as well. I mean, hey, we could probably look at all 9 of these games and say, well, whoever wins the trenches is going to win. I think it's a particular point of emphasis in this Fenwick St. Mary's game.
For sure, for sure.
Yes. All right. So you were saying, let's move on to Thursday.
Yeah, where you want to start? I mean, we got quite a few games. There's not really much to do chronologically. We can go in order of the rivalries. There's a lot of different ways to sort of order this thing, or we can just kind of go
Well,
off
well,
the
let's
cuff.
start with the team that you know the most about, the Peabody Tanners. Um, They travel to Saugus for their annual turkey tussle. 10 a.m. Most of these games at 10 a.m. In fact, all of them, I think, with the exception of St. John's Xaverian, which is 10:15, that we will get to. But Peabody has long dominated Saugus, been well documented. I think I tallied up it's 30 of the last 34 games they've won, I want to say. And they're going for their 10th in a row. Mark Betancourt has only lost once during his time there. Do you see anything changing? Is it going to be business as usual, or does what appears to be an improved Saugus team this year finally put their collective foot down and say, "Hey, enough's enough," and we're changing things up here?
Well, first we'll see what the weather is, right? I mean, that sort of sometimes can be the great equalizer. I think the game in 2019, one of the last games there at Stackpole. In fact, it might have been the last game at Stackpole. Was 14-7 game in the fourth quarter in muddy conditions, right? Kind of lousy game, lousy day. So sometimes that can be the great equalizer if it's cold, if kids don't want to be out there. I mean, I really think that's kind of the key for Peabody is to bring that energy. Last year's game seemed to lack the juice a little bit. And so I just don't want to see them out there going through the motions. I mean, I think they've lost 5 of their last 6 and they had energy in all of those games, but just not able to make big plays. At the end of games, with the exception of Beverly game.
I was going to say that was the one game that they did make something happen at the end of the game.
Well, and the funny thing is, in a lot of those, in 3 of those losses, the playoff game and the Danvers game specifically, they made plays to take the lead with less than 5 minutes to go, right? So they're making the plays at the end, but then the other team, they gave up the plays to give up the lead, right? So they weren't able to hold on. So, I guess in that sense, it's not a case of having a lack of energy, but more just a case of not finishing. But again, like I just last year, it felt a little down on Thanksgiving. It felt a little bit lacking in energy. So I'd like to see that change. I mean, I know there are a lot of seniors. It's a very senior heavy group. And so, get them involved. Guys like Gabe Santos, Kyle Santos, Jace Jean Pierre, Tyler Rappold, the guys that are still left, health wise, get the ball in their hands, let them do their thing. Don't mess around. Don't try to do fancy trick plays. Don't try to, do anything off script, because it's Thanksgiving. Like just kind of show up and do your stuff, and then kind of, if it's the fourth quarter and you're in good shape, or the game dictates it, maybe you try some trick plays or whatever. But really just kind of show up, do your thing, and kind of take out the frustrations of these last 6 weeks that didn't go your way, on the other side.
What about if you're Saugus? I mean, that's got to be a ton of frustration. We talked about Swampscott, being frustrated they haven't been able to beat Marblehead in a decade. It's got to resonate much more so in Saugus. I mean, is there a way that they collectively rise up and can pull off an upset? I mean, of course, anything is possible, but under what scenario does that happen, in your opinion?
I mean, I think it's a numbers game for them, right? I mean, the last few years they have not had a whole ton of kids dressed come Thanksgiving time. Now, these consolation round games certainly help with that, trying to keep kids healthy. I mean, they've won 2 of their last 3. They had a competitive game against Drake it sandwiched in there. Now, that was against Chelsea, that was against Brighton. A Division 2 playoff team in Peabody is a different weight class, right?
Yeah,
So,
correct.
you've been able to build some confidence, but having said that, you just kind of, again, like it's just a matter of showing up and playing ball and keeping it close and then building confidence, right? I mean, that's kind of what happened in 2019. The last time it was a relatively close game. That was also the last time Peabody entered the game with a losing record. So, maybe there's some correlation there. You got bad weather, you got a losing record, uh, and that was the last time it was a close game, and maybe that's how it looks on paper. Now, Peabody wants to prove that they've changed their program, that they're not going back to those 2017, 18, 19 days, and winning this game certainly in decisive fashion would be a good way to send that message to the younger guys. But for Saugus, I mean, I think Steve Cummings is a good football coach. They're organized. They have a plan. They don't look like they drew up their plays in the dirt. They're relatively disciplined. It really is just a numbers game
And they
for
played some
them.
closer games this year. When I was looking at their scores, I mean, I think 3 of their 7 losses have been by 7 points or less.
Yeah, I mean they beat a Wilmington team that beat up on Essex Tech. That was in week two, so that's something. There's building blocks. I mean, there are some guys on their offensive line that wrestle on the Peabody Saugus co-op wrestling team.
Yep.
So that's a big part of this. I'm sure Freddie Espinal is going to be on everyone's mind on Thursday morning. As the Tanners are still grappling with that tragedy, and I know the kids from Saugus are too,
Yeah.
that wrestle together, and so that sort of has added another layer of I guess camaraderie and meaning to this game. I don't know of any kids on the Peabody side that play hockey, but Saugus might have some kids that play hockey too. They're co-oping in that sport now too, so there's a little bit of connective tissue there as well.
I know we've talked about this in the past and like, is it time for, and trust me, I'm not one for breaking up long time rivalries or whatever, but has it reached a point where maybe Peabody and Saga should find other Thanksgiving opponents? And one that we talked about, this is a nice segue into this, is Masconomet. Maybe Masconomet and Peabody.
Professional. You're a professional
Yeah, I don't
seguer.
know about that.
That's pretty good.
We've talked about Peabody and Masconomet playing. That hasn't happened yet, but Masconomet has a new Thanksgiving Day opponent in Northeast Regional. Again, from the outside, it would seem to me that Masconomet would be heavily favored. But we also know that Northeast Tech always brings it, plays tough, kind of punches above its weight class at times. So, how do you see this matchup?
Well, it's interesting. The Chieftains are pulling out all the stops to kind of get motivated for this one. I know they got some new helmet stickers,
Yeah,
which
saw
is
that. They
pretty
look
cool.
beautiful. That roll SCO, they look
Yeah,
really good.
they got some Roman numerals for the front there. 65. Imagine that. 65 years of Masco football.
Yeah,
And some of our Thanksgiving rivalries here are twice as long as that. It
right.
certainly doesn't seem that way. Seems like Masco is one of the old dogs. But that just sort of is an interesting reminder of how old some of these games are. But yeah, I think for Masco, you just it's a feeling out process. But again, similar to what I said about Peabody, like don't try to get too fancy, don't try to get too crazy. Show up, run your stuff, do your thing, and kind of see what happens. And I think Masco has had success with that most of the season. And I imagine that will continue.
I'm guessing, Willie, that health willing, they're going to want to get Jack Fabiano the ball a lot. 20 touchdowns will be a nice round number for him to end his junior year with. And he's got 17 right now and only 9 games played. He's closing in on 1,200 rushing yards. He is a junior, so they might spread it around, try to get it to some of the older guys, but for the most part, it is a junior team. Drew Gustafson, the quarterback's a junior. Cal Weidman, the top receiver, is a junior. Ryan Richardson's another junior. Um, so, maybe that washes each other out there. Anyway, I do see, especially with the weather supposed to be the way it is, I see Fabiano's number being called up a whole lot. And I'm not sure that, and I can't say this with certainty because I've never seen Northeast play this season, but I would think it might be difficult for them to stop that repeated, bashing into the line. Him with that combination of strength and speed that he has, where he can not only go north-south, but he finds a hole or he gets to the outside and he can really make it east-west as well if he needs before shooting through. Um, he's a tough back to stop, and on a lousy day, if the rain does come as we expect, um, you played football, you know this. I mean, sometimes there are guys third, especially fourth quarter, they don't want to be tackling that guy after a while. You just don't want to keep getting hit and trying to bring a big bull of a back down who has the kind of athletic ability that he has. So my guess would be they'd be feeding Jack the Rock early and often.
Well, it's interesting looking at the stats too. Northeast really not very many passing yards at all, so they want to do nothing but run it. And Masco's defense, led by the Stefanellis, the Konuskis, the Magnificos, they're going to have to be ready for that. Now, there's two other teams that also want to run, run, run. You don't want to set a late oven timer if you're going to this game.
Yeah.
That's Danvers and Gloucester, two very similar teams.
Yep.
Danvers has had the run of this rivalry in recent years. Gloucester's been shut out, what is it, 3 years in a row. how
Three
do
in a
they
row and
change
four
this?
of the last five.
I look at, Gloucester's had a better season than I expected. I look and their skill group is primarily juniors, whereas Danvers is seemingly, even though they have so many sophomores that play, their primary ball carriers are seniors. And so I wonder if, okay, maybe next year is the one for Gloucester, but I'm sure our friends on the other side of the bridge are hoping that it's this year. So what sort of is your take on this Danvers Gloucester game?
I think Danvers Gloucester is a perfect example, Willie, of how, and you could say this too, maybe to a lesser degree about Beverly Salem, but these things tend to be cyclical. High school sports are cyclical. If you look at, there was a 19-year stretch from 1995 to 2013 where Gloucester won 17 out of 19 games between the two. And you say to yourself, this is Gloucester's birthright to beat Danvers. I think the 2 years that Danvers won, one was the year that they won the NEC championship for the first time in 63 years, and I think they beat them 2 years later at home as well. But um, Danvers has turned it around. I think a lot of that has been with Ryan Nolan on board, as we know. Excellent defensive mind. Um, really coaches up his players that I don't want to dismiss the talent that they have, but I think he gets the absolute most out of his guys, whatever class he may have in a certain year. Those guys rise up, they get after it in the weight room, they play tough, they don't make excuses for injuries and whatnot. They really get after it. And this team has kind of typified it. Very, very few seniors, a lot of guys playing varsity ball for the first time, a lot of them thrown into the fire. It's hey, baptism by fire. It's the only way you guys are going to learn. And all things considered, I don't think it's been a bad year for them. 4-6 may not look great, but considering the makeup of their roster, the size of their roster, there's not a lot of guys on it all. It's been an okay season for them. Capped off by a win on the holiday would be great. Now, they've been able to find that monster back they like to have in the Owen Gasanowski or Matt McCarthy or Matt Andreas mold of the last decade in Owen Shanbach. He's really kind of taking the bull by the horns as the primary guy in that double wing attack that they have. Everybody knows what they're running. Everybody knows he's getting the ball, but he's still able to grind it out. Do we have him at 1,000 yards yet? I know he's pretty close if he's not right there.
I believe so. In fact, we have like twice as many 1,000 yard backs, as we did in a year ago. So
Yeah,
yeah, that's
1,034 with a
nice.
dozen touchdowns. Okay. And that's on 158 carries, which I think is second only to Fabiano locally. So he's a workhorse again. The conditions will suit him. Now, if I'm Gloucester, geez, Dan, great guy down there in Gloucester. He and his staff do a nice job as well. They're coming off of a week in which they didn't play because of their own since settled teacher strike, but they were not able to play that second, or I should say for them, that consolation game after they lost in the first round of the playoffs to Shawsheen. Um, and they like to run the ball as well behind Joe Allen and Thomas Cribbs and Jalen Severino if he can go. Um, I think this will be a closer matchup than it has been in recent years when Danvers was much stronger. I'm just not sure if, as you alluded to, if they're ready to snap that streak yet. And hey, they could surprise us. I mean, they beat Salem when I didn't see that coming earlier this year. Um, so they're playing at home. Their fans would love to see that streak ended as much as the players would. I just think you have to lean towards Danvers right now, just with recent history being the way it is. And we know that they have um, a back that works well in the system that they have, and they can play a little defense too.
Uh, do you think should we finish out the conference here, or should we jump around, to some of the other rivalries? What should we do next here?
Dealer's choice. You pick.
Let's save Beverly Salem for last. Keep
Okay.
people engaged, right? Make people
Okay.
watch the whole thing.
Sure.
So let's jump over to the Cape Ann League. We got
Yeah.
two Cape Ann League matchups. First, let's talk about Ipswich and Hamilton-Wenham.
Mm-hmm.
Now you always say you can throw out the records on Thanksgiving, and I certainly think that's the case here.
Yeah.
We don't need to talk about what these teams did in September and October. Both playing better in the month of November.
Mhm.
Ipswich comes in winners of two straight. Hamilton-Wenham's won two of its last four. The big thing that jumps off the page for me with the Generals is their offense. Now, they have been a different team since Cade McCollum came back at quarterback. If you look
Correct.
at their production, right? I mean, the first one, two, three, four, five, the first six games of the season, this is a team that scored five touchdowns total, right?
Yeah.
And in their last four games, they're averaging close to 30 points a game, right? So
Which is
that's
why, it may seem strange on the surface, but I think we agreed that like if there is a so-called favorite in this game, and we usually, not usually, we do assign somebody a favorite and an underdog for the purposes of making our picks every week. Hamilton-Wenham, despite having one less win and being on the road, we consider it a slight favorite in this game for that very reason. Did I lose you there, Willie?
I think, yeah, little in and out a little bit. But I think part of
Okay.
that too is the 34 nothing score last year, right? I mean, it's hard
Yeah.
to make a team a favorite, if they lost by that score a year ago. But I certainly am impressed with Ipswich's group too. I mean, Massey Pinsky is a really dangerous guy.
Ben Winter,
Will
a quarterback, I
Gronko
think
is
can cause
great
a lot of
between the
damage.
tackles. Ipswich seems to be having more success throwing a ball than they have in recent years, which I think is really dangerous too. So I see this being a very tight game. I mean, I don't see it being 34 to nothing again. That seems to be for sure for me. But I could be wrong. But we've been talking about this game for a good 2 minutes, and we haven't mentioned Caden Schrock yet.
No, and he's that power back that Hamilton Wenham has always loved to employ. I mean, for me anyway, dating back 30 plus years um, to Mike McGowan.
Hmm.
They've always loved having those guys. Chris Collins recently kind of fit that role. Um, he's a guy who can grind it out. I mean, for a team with two wins, he's over 1,000 yards himself this season. He's got 1,021 yards, I want to say, and eight touchdowns, and a lot of that production has come late uh, as they've been winning. I also think this team um, just has an ability to play well late in the season. For Ipswich, it's going to have to find a way to counterattack that. I think what you're going to see is two of the captains for Ipswich, Weil and Gromko, are going to play big roles. They're not going to be flashy in terms of numbers on the score sheet or whatnot, but those are like um, deep guys, like linemen type, defensive type stars who make a difference with their actions. And I mean, they're both vocal guys, but they let those actions speak for them. With a hard hit or coming up with a third and short stop or something like that. I think we're going to need to see Ipswich come up with several of those, whether it's against Schrock or McCollum or quick hit or pass to the outside, things like that. Um, we should also mention, and I wrote something about this recently, that this is the final game that the legendary Ipswich announcer Mel Bowen will be calling. He is retiring from the perch in the press box to his condo in Florida, at least starting next October. So this is it for him, and you got to think that the Ipswich community, which loves him, would love nothing better than to send him out with a win. I know he loves those Tigers deeply, and to be able to call one last victory on the turf at Jack Welch Field would be a thrill for him.
Certainly, no doubt. Now that's one of the older games in the Cal. Let's go to one of the newer games, and that's Essex Tech, Manchester Essex. I think this is a great marriage, so to speak, of games. I mean, there's sort of the domino effect, right? Essex Tech loses Northeast. Northeast ends up with Masco. That's not our favorite matchup, maybe in American history, but this one I think is a great match. Two green teams, literally speaking, not in terms of experience, but in terms of their colors. Cape Ann League rivals have played for the Commonwealth Athletic Conference Championship and a playoff berth on numerous occasions in the mid
And did play on
2000s.
Thanksgiving once back in 1996, which
Yep.
the Hornets put the sting on the then Bulldogs of North Shore
So, so,
Tech.
so there's some history here. Three of the area's top 10 scorers in terms of total points in Zach Hurd for Manchester and Jake Gilbert for Essex and Jacoby Casanelli, Tarasuic for Essex. I think I think Essex Tech has struggled defensively at times this year, but
Yeah.
I don't doubt that they're going to be able to put up some points. So this one I feel like could get interesting in a hurry.
I agree with you. I mean, whereas I think Hurd is the focal point of the Manchester Essex offense. I mean, he does have other weapons around him, whether it's Gabe McGee or Conrad Garfield or Felix Wood or Noah Cohen, some of those guys. Um, I think Tech is maybe a little more offensively balanced. You know, you have Jake Gilbert, who's another guy who's gone over 1,000 yards. He's got 10 touchdowns. Jacoby Casanelli Tarasuic, 3-year starter at quarterback. He's only a junior. He's rushed for close to 700 yards and thrown for over 700. I think he's got 19 combined touchdowns between the two. Nick Branchiaffori, the wide receiver, he's got 2 dozen catches, closing in on 500 yards. He's found the end zone 5 times. So they definitely have different guys they can turn to. But you're right. For them, it's about defense. It's about recognizing patterns or how the other team's lining up. It's really about keeping Wood in that pocket, I would say. I heard, excuse me, in that pocket, not letting him get unleashed in that run game where he does so much damage. He's got terrific speed. Once he hits that corner, he's tough to catch, even for the fastest guys in the secondary. So it's going to really rely on those defensive ends and outside backers, I think, to keep him contained. Let your own offense do its thing and maybe kind of force Manchester to come from behind, throwing the ball where they haven't been as efficient. I mean, they can throw the ball certainly, but they haven't been as efficient there. Um, Essex Tech deserves a better fate than 2-8. I think there are at least two games they felt like they gave away that were very winnable. Um, so they could be, 4-6 as opposed to 2-8 going in. But hey, it is what it is. Um, you know what? You can't do anything about that. You just have to play the schedule you have. And for the Tech, hopefully for them, it's a successful Thanksgiving. But Manchester's going to be a real tough opponent for them, I see.
It's just putting together a complete game. Again, offense is there, defense got to get a little bit better, but anything can happen. Anything can happen on Thanksgiving, and you should mention these guys are going to play for the Dirty Hands Project, which is in memory of an Essex Tech student who passed away last summer, or summer of 2023, I should say, a graduate. Was a supporter of the football program, didn't play, but was always at the games, blowing his air horn, Ty Mugen and whatnot, and the teams have towels with the logo there, so sort of like a Morgan's Message type of situation for those that maybe aren't familiar with the Dirty Hands Project, but they can check out the website and see the logo. He was an arborist student at Essex Tech, so he was starting his own tree cutting company, and so the logo
Oh,
incorporates
nice.
actually his logo from his tree business, and so it's really cool, and it's just nice to see the teams come together for a good cause and something that means more than themselves, and the athletic directors there, TJ at Essex and Cammy at Manchester have done a great job making this game feel special. It's really the first Thanksgiving game, but hopefully it's the first of many, 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 and this can become a great rivalry for years to come.
That'd be great. Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned the color scheme. They both do have terrific uniforms.
Exactly. Much to the chagrin of Coach Connors, who's a Springfield guy, and it always reminds him of Endicott, but they are still nice.
Yeah, I like them. They look good.
Uh, let's 2 games left. Both wars. Let's start with St. John's Prep. Much like their first loss to CM when they had to turn it around quick to face BC High, the Prep no time to sit and feel sorry for themselves with the Division One defending champion and Super Bowl finalist again this year, Xaverian, coming to town. So how does St. John's rally and again they proved the only time they lost, they came back with a vengeance. Do they have another one of those in them? How can they upset these Hawks on Thanksgiving morning?
Well, I mean, certainly you'd like to think so. I think if there's one thing that Brian St. Pierre and his coaches teach the players over there, it's um, togetherness, brotherhood, and the job's not finished until that final play of the season. And yeah, they're not going to the Super Bowl, and that's ultimately what they strive to play for. But the season is not over. They have one more opponent left. It's their arch rivals. It's a team that they have not had a lot of success against on Thanksgiving. I think they've only won a third of the games played since they started in 1992. Xaverian is very talented. They have a lot of very good players, and you know, eh, respect for the game and respect for the rivalry. They are not going to rest guys um, as they get ready for Thanksgiving. Nor would St. John's Prep in that same spot. But you're going to see the big guns for Xaverian that we read about or we hear about or we see on social media. Vincent Busa, the running back, who's a standout player for them. Shivagato, the junior quarterback, David, I think his first name is. Um, he's a wide receiver. I'm sorry. Will Wood is the quarterback, sophomore. We got some big guys on the line who are going on to play college ball that are going to cause some real problems for St. John's Prep, who's a little dinged up on the line. So there's going to have to be an answer there. Can they step up and solidify what's always been a very, very good line? Now, we know the Prep has a ton of skill guys. Can they make hay against a very tough, very aggressive, and very big Xaverian defense? Um, do the seniors get more looks in this game because it's the final game? Do we see Deacon Robillard play more under center than he has for most of the year? Is he going to split time with Chris Vargas, more of a 50-50 type thing than has been the case because Vargas has been getting the majority of the snaps? Or do they just play as they normally do? They play to win. They put the best guy out there, and whoever that is for a series or a set of downs or whatnot, they go with that. I think we'll see a lot of Jeff Quigley, senior running back. We'll see a lot of Merrick Barlow, senior wide receiver. If we can get the two senior tight ends mixed in between Josh Harmon and Will Kent, we'll see those guys. But so much of the prep success, Willie, I think, is because of those. I should mention Gael Garcia too, the big fullback. They'll want to get him in as part of that BFT package they have in short yardage situations. But the Brady Salves, the Jordan Torribios, the Vargas that I mentioned, the Pearson Scholars, those are parts of their everyday offense, those underclassmen, and they're still going to get their own run. To answer your question, I think the prep is probably a slight underdog, even though they're at home, because they're coming off of a loss. The Varian is coming in with momentum and whatnot, and they've had more success in the series. But would a St. John's Prep win surprise me? Not in the least, because they have that will to fight. And, they talk about each team. This is Team 118. Team 118 wants to go out with a win. They lost to Xaverian twice last year on Thanksgiving and in the Super Bowl. Xaverian may still be going back to the game this year. It's the Super Bowl game, but the prep can send them there with the loss. I think that's what they're hanging their hats on.
Definitely wouldn't surprise me, and again, I think weather related too, right? I mean, so if it's mucky out there, they're not going to be putting the ball in the air too much. Now, St. John's is the kind of team that can spend the whole game in that, beast, BFT, single wing, whatever you want to call it. They might be able to add some wrinkles to that. True Wildcat looks, looking at the weather. I mean, they might be doing that today. And it's interesting. Most teams in the state are not prepared to deal with that. I got to imagine Xaverian is one of the few teams that would be well coached enough and disciplined enough and actually large enough up front to sort of deal with that. So you wonder if that could be, an interesting little chess match there. Like, could St. John stay in that if the weather is sort of preventative of throwing the ball and will Xaverian be able to handle it? Will they desire to handle it? Because it takes a toll on you
Well, I
physically
mean,
handling
it's the
that.
kind of game that St. John's played last Friday against Needham. It rained all game. And they did have some issues throwing the football. You can't get around that. But their running game was able to get on track. I think between Toribio and Quigley, they had close to 180 yards rushing on the ground. So they can have success there. I mean, obviously, they don't want to rely solely on the run. You do want to be able to mix in passing successfully. So they're going to have to find a way to do that. Their line is going to have to be able to withstand pressure on stunts and blitzes, excuse me, whatever kind of front that Xaverian is going to throw at them. But, you know, it may not be a regular preparation week, but they have had time. It's certainly not like they don't know Xaverian. They're certainly familiar with the Hawks, what they run, what their personnel is. It's not like you're preparing for a new opponent. So I think the coaches will have their team ready. The players will be ready. It's a matter of execution. Can you get it done for 48 minutes on the holiday?
And again, they haven't lost a true home game since 2021. So, if you're looking for something to hang your hat on, if you're a senior, oh yeah, we're not going to the Super Bowl. Woe was us, but we can go undefeated at home. I mean, that's something, that's pretty cool. And especially with the schedule that they play,
Yeah. And
that's
without being
definitely,
corny, I'd like to think that our dear friend, the late Jean DePlacido, watches over them, her beloved Eagles. And, maybe she can help deliver a holiday feast for the Eagles to have their turkey, if that makes
yeah, you
sense.
never know. You
Yeah.
certainly never know. But so that leaves
Do they
one,
do they cook turkey at the prep tailgate? They get like an actual like college tailgate going for
yeah, I don't
most
know.
games.
You know what? That's interesting.
They put the bird on the spit or something. I don't know.
They might have one of those deep fryers over there, potentially, I would
Yeah,
say.
good. I don't know.
Speaking of deep fryers, let's dive deep into the final bout that we have here, and this is Beverly Salem. Uh, this is very difficult to predict for me. I got to tell you, I would not be surprised if this game went to overtime. I would not be surprised
You
if
bite your
Beverly won
tongue.
by.
You bite your
I would
tongue.
not. I would. Well, are they still playing those ridiculous extra quarters, or have we given that
No.
up because it's a Federation rules
Yeah,
violation?
no, they don't do that anymore. No,
So,
they
so
they
that's a
play.
plus,
They were playing 12 minutes on Thanksgiving when everybody else was playing 10. There
right?
were times
Yeah.
I'd be sitting in the press box. It would be the third quarter, and I'd be seeing final scores coming in. I'm like, what the hell's going on here?
But you know, I was gonna say I wouldn't be surprised if it went to overtime, but I also wouldn't be surprised if Beverly won by 3 touchdowns or if Salem won by 3 touchdowns. I can't figure out what's going on with either one of these teams. Uh, they've both been up and down, up and down. There have been times this season where Salem has looked like a playoff team, and times when it can't get out of its own way. Most of the season, Beverly couldn't get out of its own way, but I look the last 2 weeks, 41 points, 42 points. It's the first time I looked it up that they've scored 40 points in back-to-back weeks since the Super Bowl team of 2012. I mean, that's not nothing. Is this Beverly team just played a couple of bad teams here, or have they really found something at the end of the season?
I think it's like most things. The truth is probably in the middle there. I mean, they're not playing, Xaverian and Duxbury in their two consolation games, but you play who's on the schedule, you win. You beat both teams convincingly. You take them out of the game at halftime. I think they were up, what, 34-0 over Belmont, and they were up by two scores against Classical, and then ran the opening of kickoff back to the second half, and then really put their foot down the accelerator and blew them out the rest of the way. Um, they are trending upward, which is good to see late in the season. You certainly want, I think you would mention this perhaps when you were writing about Masconomet on their Thanksgiving Day game, which will be out in the paper tomorrow. But, they're playing for their seniors, but also for the juniors to say, like, hey, end the season on a good win. That takes you into good feeling in the off season. Maybe that gets a few more guys out for the team or a few more bodies in the weight room those early mornings to getting ready or, putting in those cold weather runs to keep your body in good condition, whatnot. Um, for Beverly, I think too, it's another question, and we touched upon this at the beginning with Marblehead. So to come full circle here, will Beverly have its head coach? Beverly's still on strike. Uh,
Yeah, yeah,
Jeff
good point.
Jeff Hutton is a teacher in the union. Um, Cannot, as of right now, Tuesday afternoon, as we're recording this, the strike has not been settled. If the game were to be played in 5 minutes, he would not be able to be the head coach. Could it be resolved before now in game time? Sure. Um,
Who's calling the plays anyway? I mean, somebody's somebody's been calling the plays and put up 83 points in 2 games when they may not have that many in the last 2 seasons. That guy deserves some credit, whoever it is.
you know what? That's Big John. that's John, the offensive coordinator, who's getting it done. Um, John McMillan doing a really nice job there. And I do think, if we're being fair here, it's against some less than stout clubs, but that those games are matched up, supposedly even games, and Beverly rolled in both of them. So
I would say too,
and the
there's some
defense is getting it done.
yeah, there's some
Um,
traditionalists that don't like these games, but listen, I would say if Beverly wins on Thanksgiving, and if they contend for the NEC title next season, it's going to be because of those two consolation games. I mean, let's
yeah,
face it, this is a great thing for teams that are trying to build. Salem went through the same thing in 2023. I
that's
mean, I'm
right.
sorry, 2022, winning some games and then getting ready for the following season. This has been a lot better for Beverly than in the old days. They probably would have had, I don't know, say Swampscott and Winthrop scheduled, and they
Yeah.
probably would have lost both games pretty handily, and they'd be feeling a lot different. So this is great. I think it's great. And, again, like they just have so many athletes. The thing that concerns me if I'm Salem is the turnovers, I mean, they beat Pentucket fairly easily. I think you would agree if they don't throw a bunch of interceptions in that game. I think the same thing is true. They had some costly turnovers against Winthrop and against Kip. And you take away the turnovers and you win those three games, and you're talking about a whole different type of Salem season. And I look out at that Beverly secondary, I see guys like Quiet Tech, guys like White, and these are guys that can go up and steal the football from your receivers
Yeah.
if you're not careful. So
Well, I
if
think
I had
that's
a
why we've
crystal,
seen Salem made the switch to Jake Lister at quarterback.
sure,
Um,
no, yeah. So I mean,
he's
Swampscott
done a
too.
nice job for them. He played really well in that second half of the Pentucket game I saw. And then he obviously played very, very well when they defeated Boston Latin Academy in their most recent outing. I
Yeah,
want to
no,
say that he completed half his passes. I want to say he was 7 for 14 for like 83 yards and a couple of touchdowns.
yep.
Um,
Yeah, exactly.
you,
Couple of
you
picks he
know,
threw against Swampscott. So if I had a crystal ball, if you could tell me that, if Salem commits more than two turnovers, I feel pretty good betting the house on Beverly. If Salem commits no turnovers, I really like their chances to win this game.
well, I mean, as you mentioned, I think it's a really difficult game to pick. When I went through to make our football picks, started last night, and I picked about two-thirds of the games, and there were a couple. I'm like, I got to think about these a little more. And this was definitely one that I had to think about. I mean, one obviously, like I said, is Beverly going to have its head coach or not? That's a difference right there. Um, you mentioned how Salem in 2022 led to the success in 2023. And if you remember right, they had a lot of juniors on that 2022 team who really had super senior seasons. I could see the same thing in Beverly, where a lot of their key guys, at least in the skill positions, Danny Pierce at quarterback, Callum McKay out wide, Sean Coster at running back, guys like that. Um, are juniors now and could use that to motivate themselves into a strong off season with a win here. I think for Salem, a lot of it, and I know we've said this a lot of times here, whether it's Fabiano or Shanbar or some of these bell cow guys, I think Rocco Ryan's going to have the ball in his hands a lot for
Yep,
Salem.
yep,
Uh, Rocco is really, you sometimes you see guys not listed as running back, a wide receiver, split end or whatever. They're just listed as athlete. I think Ryan is the very definition of being an athlete. Um, he's a guy who combined rushing and receiving, Willie, has almost 1,400 yards of offense this season and 14 touchdowns. In fact, just doing a little bit of research. He is two away from tying the all-time school record for touchdowns in a career. He's got 40 right now. 42 is the record held by our good friend and Salem High Hall of Famer and legend Malik Van Alstine. I'm guessing Salem is going to do everything in its power to get him three or more touchdowns on the holiday. And there's no guarantees of that. Beverly's defense is going to have a lot to say about that. But Salem is going to scheme and create opportunities for him to do that, whether it's on long pass play or a screenplay where they set up a nice little blocking scheme for him, whether that's in um, running situations where they get him on an outside sweep or they get him working on the buck or an inside dive or trap or whatnot. I mean, he can really do any of those things that they ask him to. Um, but he's not a one-man show, as we know. Elvis Espinal is another dangerous running back they can use. I mean, he'll be the primary guy next year, but he's got close to 400 yards this year already. Oscar Fernandez is a great option on the outside. Now they're going to miss um, Mikey. Yeah, say it. Oh God, sorry, Michael. The
Curtin.
lacrosse player who's injured now for the season. Mikey Curtin. Thank you. They could use his speed and his hands, but they're not without other weapons outside of Rocco Ryan. And in a small sample size, Lista had showed what he's capable of. This is a great building block for him as a sophomore. He's got 2 more years after this to kind of grow. What better way for him than to pick up his first Thanksgiving Day win as a 10th grader to ride into the offseason and use that for fuel to better himself as a junior year. So there's all kinds of storylines here. Beverly hasn't lost three straight to Salem since what did you tell me that since Ronald Reagan was president or in his
Yeah,
first
80, I
term?
think it's like 80, 82. There was a tie. So Beverly did go 3 years without winning, but there was a tie in there. And we know there's overtime nowadays, so there'll be no ties. I believe it's either 82 to 84 or 81 to 83.
81 to 83, as I see here. Yeah, and you know what? All those games, well, you get a 1 point game, you get a 9 point game, you get a 2 point game, all wins for Salem before Beverly won the following year when they won the Northeastern Conference title in 1984. They won 28 to 14 at Hurd. Um, So Beverly obviously doesn't want that streak to keep going. For Salem, yeah, I mean they've taken their lumps since the turn of the century. I want to say Salem has only won 6 times in those games, maybe seven. It hasn't been many. So Beverly has dominated the 21st century, but it's turned in Salem's favor the last few years. Can they keep it going? And they've put up a ton of points the last 2 years. They've got 74 points the last two games while allowing only 14. So recent history favors the Witches. They are at home. They do have the better record. Should be a really, really interesting game.
Well, not just dominated, but I mean it's been you got to go all the way back it's been only what it looks like only once in the last 15 years that it's been a game in the fourth quarter, a one
Yeah,
score game.
right.
And even that one in 2018, I don't think we felt like it was ever in doubt. I think you got to go all the way back to 2010, when Beverly probably was pulling out its starters to go to the Super Bowl, and Salem pulled off a 12-7 win. So a lot of these games, no matter who's won them, yeah, they haven't been super competitive. And I know it's sort of like your crystal ball prediction every year that it's going to be a great game, and it's finally going to be a close game. And I
Yeah,
certainly hope, I think on paper, this looks like it could be the one. But again, I honestly would not be surprised if either one of these teams won by 20 points either. Like it's been that kind of Jekyll and Hyde season, I feel like, for both of these teams.
I think you're right. Yeah, I think you're definitely right. I
It's
mean,
really hard to predict, but
we
I
always
just
hope
want
for
to,
close games because, it's better viewing. I guess if you play for any of our teams, you want to win in a blowout fashion. You want to empty your bench. You want to get all those guys in there. We prefer close games. That's us. I'm sure most fans do too. But the important thing is it's Thanksgiving. It's a great tradition. I'm glad we still have it here in the state, and it hasn't been done away with for the sense of some kind of fakakta playoff system or whatnot. Thanksgiving is still important. Yes, it's not 1950 or even 1985 anymore, but the games still matter. The alumni still come out. It's still for bragging rights, and here's hoping we get at least somewhat decent weather and the crowds come out and we get some great games.
yeah, that's the one thing. Let me just say too, for people out there watching, if you haven't watched our Thanksgiving fantasy draft podcast, please go back and do so. And I will challenge the viewers out there. Our little cute little introduction video.
Yeah,
We've got four plays: one from the '90s, one from the 2000s, one from the 2010s, and one from the 2020s. And I much like George Costanza's candy lineup, only I hold the key to what those four plays are.
and
And I
they're
would
not
like
all Twix.
correct. It's not a trick. They're not all Twix. I'm curious to see if anybody out there can guess or what all four of the plays are. Let us know if you have thoughts or ideas on Twitter. I'm at Matt Williams underscore SN. He's at Phil Stacey underscore SN. Send us an email at salemnewsports@gmail.com. Leave a comment on the video if you even recognize one of the plays. Maybe it's one of your friends, one of your teammates. It's at Salem News Sports on YouTube, or you can find the link. If you're watching this podcast, you probably know where to find it, right? So it's kind of silly to be telling you, but like our channel, subscribe to the channel, and let us know, and we'll talk about it next week. Now,
Do you have a
whether
football
anybody,
answer key like
I
George
do.
is holding here?
Yes, it's in a secret envelope. Only I hold the key, and
I wish I had thought to do this and like superimpose your face here
that would have
over
been funny. Maybe
over
we could do
Mr.
that for next
Alexander.
webut
Yeah, that would be good. All right.
but
Hey,
but
from our
I
families.
will read. We will read the comments on the show next week if
Yeah.
we get any, and if we don't, then I mean I'll reveal who the players were anyway. Phil may not even know all four himself.
You want to know
We,
something?
we
I know three out of four, and I don't. I admit I do not know one of them. It's going to
we
take
certainly
some.
don't. We certainly know that Nick doesn't.
Yeah,
So there's that.
I'm doing the Homer into the bushes thing here. Like,
Yeah, Nick.
yeah,
Nick Kukru might know some of them, but
yeah,
yeah, send us your guesses and send us your own highlight plays. Anybody out there that's got some fun plays, we're going to be looking to make a new video as we transition into the winter season. So
yep,
if you've got a game-winning three-pointer, a nice sauce pass, or a Michigan goal or something, send it to us, and maybe we'll incorporate it in our video.
yeah.
And if you don't send anything, then you're just going to have to look at our ugly faces.
Sorry. Hey, happy Thanksgiving from our families to yours. Enjoy the games, and we will talk to you soon. From Matt Williams, I'm Phil Stacey. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.